Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. I hope everyone is having a great week. It's one day closer to this pandemic ending. Hopefully, every day that passes, I stay positive that things will hopefully go back to normal soon. And I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy and just making the most of the situation. So, welcome to another episode. I'm excited to have everybody here. I have a very, very special guest with me today. I'm excited to announce him, who just recently became the full-time Red Sox sideline reporter, Jahmai Webster, which is very exciting. So congratulations on that. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much, Gabby. I'm doing fantastic. Hanging in there, that's for sure. You mentioned the pandemic, and I'm like, this is crazy that we're coming up on a year and still into it, But I'm happy that there's vaccine out, and eventually it'll roll to us folks who are on the younger end of the spectrum. So we'll see.
Yeah, I do know people that have been vaccinated, which is exciting because it's promising that we're getting closer and closer to this whole process ending. So definitely moving in a positive direction there.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is just wild that it's actually been a year, right? Or coming up on it, because I felt like when it hit March, I remember like it was yesterday. Like I was literally covering a Celtics game for Nesson, and that was on a Friday night. Or excuse me, that was on that was on a Friday night. And later that week, Rudy Gobert was the first case in the NBA, and the Celtics were hosting the Jazz that Friday. So then Wednesday, everything shut down. And then that same night, I got sick. So I was like sick as a dog. To this day, I don't know if I had COVID or not, because at that point they were like not testing people, but
Yeah.
I had a few of the symptoms, but I didn't have like too crazy of them. Like I had body aches, very much flu-like, but it took me out, man. It took me out for like 7 days and I recovered, but then literally the world changed then. That's why I'll never forget. Like that was March 10th. So
Yeah,
wild.
it was crazy. My dad's birthday is in March, and I remember we went out for dinner as a family, and it was a day or two before they shut down restaurants and said nobody could go out to eat anywhere. So we hit that timing perfectly, but it was crazy how quickly it went from just everybody living their normal lives to all of a sudden you can't go anywhere or do anything. And I realized the other day that it's almost March now, so it's been almost a year since this whole thing's been going on.
Exactly. And even more so to that point, like my youngest daughter was born. I have a girl who's my second girl,
Yeah.
who's about to be 1. Her birthday is March 24th. So try to imagine thinking about like my wife having to give birth during the pandemic and then her being born. Like there was so much uncertainty. Like nobody knew what was going on. Should you wear a mask? Should you not? Should we be talking? Should we shake hands? It was wild.
Yeah, I know. Nobody knows really what to do. And I have a couple family members whose wives are pregnant too right now. And it's just crazy because, that with the doctor's appointments and everything, they're just working a lot differently now. So a lot's changed. And even with the working from home, I see that you're working from home. So it's
Yeah.
things have really
This was
sort
my
of
home
changed over the
studio
last year.
that was brought to me. This is my home studio that was basically created in necessity from the pandemic, because we were doing shows from home for a little bit before we got back in the building. So, a lot of this equipment is barely new, but hey, I'm like, hey, I got to start me a podcast next. Boston Balling 2.0.
Yeah, yes, yeah. You maybe you will, and then I can be a guest on that one maybe
You'll
too.
be my first.
Yes, please, for sure. Yeah, but why don't you just kind of tell everybody a little bit about your background and how you got into working in sports?
Okay, yeah, definitely. It's a long story, but I'll try to consolidate it into the time that we have for this podcast.
Yeah.
But for me, I was bitten by the journalism bug probably, shoot, you know, third grade. And I tell this story a lot of times when I'm given this background, because we had this school project, this class project actually, where we had to create a newspaper. And we were learning about the different aspects of the newspaper, the front page stories, this, that, and the other, the sports, the advertisements. And my section of the classroom was responsible for the comics. That's what I had to do. So I created a story called Torture Woman. It was inspired by this girl who sat next to me. And it wasn't a situation where I liked her or whatever. That's why I called her Torture Woman. But it just, I just created this, and that sparked my creativity. That sparked my storytelling. That sparked this ability in me wanting to bring characters to life. So that was in the third grade. So what are you, 7, 8 years old at that point?
Yeah.
And going all the way through life with that kind of in the back of my mind. So through junior high school, through high school, still trying to discover my passion. In high school, I was playing sports throughout, basically from since I was a little kid, and that's kind of how I was involved with it. My dad's a track coach. I ran track. I played football. I played basketball. I played baseball. Um, so all those sports I was part of organized team, but it wasn't until high school where I was like, all right, I got to focus. So I'm trying to make it to the NBA. So I got to single out one of the sports. So I stuck with basketball. That was the best sport I was in. But in the midst of that, it was also trying to win over coaches, trying to, prove to my teammates. So it was just a lot of like, I wasn't like a blue chipper, I felt like I was, if I would have continued and pursued my athletic career, like I could have been a star in high school, but as I would have got to college and maybe even to the pros, I would have probably been a bench player, like a role player. Like I come in, I'm a lethal shooter. I'll give you a bucket when you need it off the bench. But, people aren't really giving me that chance to shine. Like I was like a Freddie Van Vliet. If I could describe something like dude is an all-star now, he's turned himself into something great. That was probably the best way to describe my game. Very unheralded, very, very much not somebody who got a lot of the attention, but that was me. So I took that and I was like, all right, well, let's come up with a backup plan. If I'm not going to be in sports, if I'm not going to make it to the league, let's get as close as we can without actually being in it. And that's where it came back to that memory and that creation of telling stories in the third grade. So I started writing for the school newspaper, as well as being an athlete playing, high school basketball. So I did that, and I was like breaking stories with the girls' basketball team. They had some issues with their coach, not like anything indiscretionary, but just like fairness and playing stuff like that. There was some issues. So I told their story. I tried to get him for comment. It became this whole big issue on campus. And I actually won a reporting award for it from my journalism class. So it was like a big deal. And I was excited because it was a situation where I used my relationships and leveraged those to get the great story out. So that's when I was like, I'm hooked. This is great. Print is, it's the foundation for everything that I've done. But I was always felt like I had more personality. I wanted to express that and show that. So I was like, TV is for me. That's what I want to do. So when I got to college, I declared my major broadcast journalism at Cal State Northridge. Shout out to the Matadors. And, the rest is history. But that's kind of how I got to this point, as far as finding the career path that I wanted to choose and then choosing it. And then once I realized my hoop dreams were over, I just focused on the academics.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I actually had the pleasure of going into Nesson to visit, and I got to meet with Jahmai, and he gave me a lot of helpful advice for my own career too. So sitting here today with him, it's kind of interesting how that all comes full circle, and he's always been somebody that I've enjoyed watching on TV myself. So definitely really happy for you for pursuing that dream and making it happen.
Definitely. I mean, I didn't really have a backup plan. And also I looked at something else that I was like, how can I really just enjoy myself? Because I didn't want to get into work and be grinding like a lot of these people who do, things that they don't really want to do and you're not happy doing it. Yeah. So I feel like I don't really work, like I'm just, I try to bring the stories and I take it seriously, of course, but I just have a good time. And I like to have fun. I like to bring that through on my broadcast games that I'm a part of. I like to do that anytime I'm on television and really just have a good time with it. So that's another thing. I just didn't want to feel like I'm working all the time. So when it starts to feel like work, I'm like, all right, I need to switch it up. I need to do something different.
Yeah, that's what they always say too, that it won't really feel like work if you're doing something you love.
Except never work a day in your life. You're doing something you love. That is for sure. And it's so true. It really is.
Yeah, exactly. And, so with you, I mean, your journey is definitely a really successful one. And I know everybody's paths are different, but the way that you carry yourself when you're on TV is definitely something that I admire, and just how engaging you are. And I feel like that's something that comes with a lot of practice doing, but it just seems like this is something that you were meant to do for a long time because you just look so comfortable doing it.
Yeah, you know what? I appreciate that for sure, because it didn't always come that effortless and easy for sure. So I mean, the journey has been crazy, right? So I've been doing this for like 13 years, coming up on 13 years now. Graduated from college in 2008. And I was on the 5-year plan. I should have been graduating in 2007, but You know, I joined this illustrious fraternity. Nobody can see, but I'm wearing a shirt, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I joined that. So that set me back a little bit, you know, party hard, stay up late, but most of all, we graduate. You know, it's kind of a motto in my chapter. But you know, so that put me on a 5-year plan, and I was just really taking my time because, man, I really enjoyed college so much. It was the highlight probably of my early 20s, you know, and mid 20s, just being in school and having an opportunity to just really fall into the person that I wanted to be, like adulthood and having responsibility and being looked at as like, hey, you're a man now, right? So I enjoyed that so much. But after 5 years, I graduated 2008, and it was a struggle to find my first on-air job. And I say a struggle. It took me 2 months, but for me, it felt like that was an eternity. Like there were some classmates who a year after graduating were still trying to find their first on-air job 2-3 years later. But for me, it was just like, all right, I've sent out my resume tape, and back then it wasn't like YouTube links. You couldn't send a Vimeo really quick. You'd have to actually put it on a DVD and ship it out. So postage was astronomical. And I'm a broke college student, just graduated, and I'm paying like, I don't know, $150, $200 in postage to send these heavy DVDs, my resume and my cover letter to stations all across the country. So I probably sent out, man, 80 to 100. And there's well over 200 television markets, medium to large, all the way from New York to St. Joseph's, Missouri. You know what I mean? Small markets like that, like places you will start out. And nobody called me back. So for 2 months, and you know, I'm looking at it, and I got tracking. I paid that extra tracking for the postage. So I'm like, they received it. I know they got it right within 4 or 5 days, but no response. And usually, you know, people don't really respond to you, right? You kind of realize that if you're sending out resume tapes. And 2 months went by. So I went back to my college, talked to my professor. I was like, hey, you got some connections here in LA. You know, do you know any lines on any jobs? Like, I just want to get in production. I don't even care. Like, I'll do anything. So he's like, oh, funny you should ask. Somebody just actually reached out to me. They have they're interviewing production assistants at Fox for Fox NFL Sunday or whatever, and all their shows that they do. So as you know, Fox is the only national television network that's on the West Coast. Everybody else is out on the East Coast. Yeah. ESPN, NBC, CBS, all of them out here. So Fox is the only one West Coast based. So the importance of that is all the executives are out there. So I mean, high level guys at the very top. So at ESPN, that would be his name is slipping me. What's the president? Jimmy Pitaro.
Yeah, Jimmy Pitaro.
So Jimmy Pitaro, like, yeah, right, like actually having the Jimmy Pitaro level executive on the West Coast in the building that you're going to be working in is massive, because you're running into these people who are real movers and shakers. So I thought it was an incredible opportunity. I interviewed for it, and about a week later or a couple weeks later, they hired me. And then I had to turn it down because a week prior, I got my first on-air interview and job, and they hired me. So I was like, during my interview, they knew I wanted to be on TV. They knew I wanted to do front-facing camera stuff. So I was like, guys, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to take my journey to College Station, Texas, where I'm going to cover Texas A&M and high school football in the state of Texas. And I'm going to try to make it here back one day. So that's kind of where things started. And that's kind of how I got in and broke in.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a really hard industry to break into. I know a lot of people take a long time to really find that first on-air job. And it's tough, especially in sports, on the sports side, because I feel like there just aren't as many sports opportunities out there for those on-air roles. So it's still just as competitive now as it was, I'm sure, when you were looking.
Oh, exactly. And even more so because people nowadays, college graduates, recent graduates, you got more avenues to get into. Podcasting, the digital shows on YouTube, Vimeo, whatever you're doing. I mean, Periscope, you can honestly create your own content anywhere with a microphone, 2 ring lights. You're good and you're golden, you know? So the competition is more fierce, which means people out there are now getting more reps. Like, you're getting more comfortable on camera. You're getting more comfortable being yourself, your authentic self, which is what attracts people to wanting to know these personalities, right? Because it's still a personality driven medium. It's still driven by looks, right? You keep yourself in good shape. You're also be able to talk informative about sports. You got a chance to really, you know, be something big and create your own lane. So I think that's how the competition has gotten that much more fierce. But yeah, when you're coming out back in 08, 07, early 2000s, it was still fierce, but it was a little bit less that way.
Yeah, you know, exactly. And everything about creating your own path and just going different avenues. There's so many things now that you can do since a lot of the industry is digitally and social media based now. So the podcasting for me, I felt was a good way for me to just start to create my path too. And everybody can approach it differently. And the way that people break in now is so much different than it was then. So it's just interesting with the way technology's changed, how people are doing things now and coming up with these creative ways to make their own content.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if this was the age that I was breaking into the industry in, then I would have probably never left the West Coast. I would have never left home because I'd never lived anywhere outside of LA. You know, I was born in Inglewood, Great Western Forum, those Showtime Lakers where they played before they moved to the Staples Center in downtown. So that's all I knew. And I'm very much family oriented. I got 4 siblings, or there's 4 of us total. So 2 brothers and a sister. I was the only one who left for like a decade. My sister joined the armed forces, so she traveled around a little bit, but I was the only one who left. Everybody was back home, so it was tough to leave. But if I had these avenues, I would have never left. And I've been in 4 TV markets in that time that I've been in the business. It started in College Station, Texas, and then I moved up to Waco, Texas, which is where our sister station was. So College Station was where the satellite station was, but the main station was actually in Waco. So I got promoted to weekend anchor, moved to Waco, Texas. After 2 years in Texas, I went to Honolulu, Hawaii. Shout out to everybody out there in the 808. And I had probably the most fantastic 4 years of my life living on Oahu and being a part of KITV there. And really, that's where I blossomed, I think, because I had a great mentor in my sports director who really taught me about the essence of writing, producing, all that stuff. And then after 4 years there, went on to Denver, Colorado for 2 years. And then after Denver for 2 years, I finally landed in Boston, and we've been here for 4 years now, going on more. So we'll see where the journey continues to lead. But yeah, it's been crazy.
Yeah, and Boston is awesome. It's a great city and the best sports city out there. I mean, I'm biased, but it definitely is. It has a great fan base there, and just the sports coverage there is awesome, and just a lot of people who get really, really into the sports teams there. So it's a great market to be in and a great place. So you landed in a good spot for now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I used to be biased too, like, oh, LA is better, but I mean, man, these Boston fans, these folks in Massachusetts, these folks in New England, really, I mean, this is an amazing sports town to be in, and really the most passionate fans that I've ever come across. I mean, you talk about a Wednesday noon, 1 o'clock first pitch Red Sox game, and you got packed stadium. There's 40,000 people there. Like, don't you guys have to go to work? What are you guys doing here? You think it's going to be low key, but never the case.
Yeah, I know. And that kind of leads well into the next thing I wanted to bring up, which was just kind of about last year's baseball season and there not being fans at games. And I know for fans like me, it was really strange watching games and not having fans in the stands, because the fans are a big part of the environment at the game, and I feel like the crowd helps the team to stay motivated to win games too. So from your perspective, what was that like, having to go to games and having there be nobody there? Because a big part of it is interacting with fans.
Absolutely. And my dog's going crazy right now, so I'm trying to get him to relax for a minute while we do this. But so last year it was unique. So I didn't actually go to any games last year. There was only 60 of them. And there was another sideline reporter, Garen Austin. That was her role. And I've always been kind of 1A right below her when I needed to fill in. But because of the lack of games, because of just being 60, my contributions to the broadcast last year were just like this. We get on virtual calls, be it Zoom, be it Skype, and I get one player a week. That's how I contribute. So we stay connected that way. And I didn't get to go to Fenway last year, which is crazy because every year that I've gotten here since 2016, I've been at the ballpark, in some capacity. So not having fans was strange. And I watched it like you watched it as a fan, as somebody who was just, viewing it from the outside looking in. But this year I have a front row seat, being the new full-time sideline reporter, and it being my gig and me being the man on the beat. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to probably feel like I got the ballpark to myself because I'll be the only person in there aside from essential personnel and the ball players, right? Like no fans are going to be a part of it. It's going to feel strange, but I'm gonna be walking around that ballpark, like I own the joint, right? Like these people are my guests. That's how I'm gonna feel because it's a unique experience that at this point, one other person has been able to say that they've been able to do that's been Garen. So now to have free range on the ballpark, it's going to be pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's just such a strange situation to really think about. And I'm hoping at some point down the road, as the season progresses and maybe once things kind of shape out with this vaccine, that maybe they'll be able to have some fans in the stands come the summertime or something, I would hope, because it was also strange not going to games either, because going to
Right.
games is one of my favorite things to do in the summer, and just sitting at Fenway and watching games. So I'm hoping that as more time progresses, maybe a few months into the season, we do start to see some fans at some of the stadiums, because that would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, Gabby, and I hope Dr. Fauci is right about that because we think that the vaccine rollouts are going to be available to the general public at least by late April, let's say at the very latest.
Yeah.
So if you start having people get vaccinated, and I hope that everybody out there is thinking about doing that because we can eradicate this pandemic that much faster. But if that happens, baseball is a long 6-7 months. You got to think by the fall, by at least maybe late July, August, even, that they're letting some kind of fans inside the ballpark, because that is really the heartbeat of Fenway Park. It's such a dominant place for home field advantage, and to not have that, to be feeling like you're playing, at the Boston Common or something, it probably doesn't feed to the energy that the players need. So I feel like that'll be great. But I hope that they do it when people get vaccinated, because I don't know if I feel comfortable being in there, where there's like even, 3,000 people even. Like I'm going to have PTSD after this whole thing is done, just about going to a bar and sitting in there with random strangers, because this has taught us so much. And we've been hyper vigilant and hyper focused on hygiene and being cleansed and making sure your hands are washed, which seem like basic things, right? But it's that much more, I guess, on the forefront of our minds, considering how this virus has just ravaged our everyday life as we knew it before.
Yeah, no, really, it's we're going to look back on this whole experience and just some of the things that we kind of went through, and some of the behaviors I feel like that people developed during this pandemic are things that they're going to carry with them throughout the rest of their life. And I'm going to look back and be like, wow, that pandemic really taught us that we need to be diligent about washing our hands, or anything really, or just when you're sick, just staying home and taking care of yourself. So in general, I feel like people are going to just approach things differently. And when it comes to sporting events, I think the day that people are allowed back in at Fenway Park, there's going to be an overwhelming amount of ticket sales for that first game, that people come back into the stands, because everybody's missing it.
Oh, 100%. And I'm so glad that I'm going to be able to be a part of that history, That's going to be a great time when that does indeed happen, for sure. But absolutely, to your point, washing hands, and like I'm going to have hand sanitizer with me for the rest of my life. Like I don't know how I'm going to be able to live without it, because you think about a situation like a ballpark too, where, you have access to these players and you're introducing yourself and you're meeting people. Like I got countless amount of hands that I'm shaking, people who are coming up to me wanting a high five, like, hey, what's up? It's like, now I'm gonna be like, hey man, fist bump, shoulder, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, no disrespect. It's just, hashtag COVID.
Yeah, really. It's just everybody knows that now, and it's implied that that's the reason. So I think we learn a lot from this whole experience, but I'm hoping that in terms of things getting back to normal, that includes sports too eventually, and hopefully by the fall, because I'd at least like to go to a couple games this year, because it's just it's weird not being able to go, and I love watching games on TV, but it's not the same as being there in person. So fingers crossed for that too.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And we love people watching on TV. It certainly boosts our ratings, but it'd be nice to see fans back in the stands.
Yeah, no, for sure. And with spring training quickly approaching and everything else, and this being such another season where there's all these question marks because of COVID, just like last year and everything else, and who knows if they'll be able to really get a full season in because of COVID. And I'm hoping that they do, and that's obviously the plan as of now. But hopefully that they can actually do that. And since they're planning on having a full season, I kind of look at the Red Sox right now And it's sad to me because there are so many players that were on that really special 2018 World Series team that are just not there anymore. And I think about it and I'm like, wow, even with the outfield especially, you had 3 great outfielders out there, and now all of 3 of them are gone. And it's just a really weird and sad feeling. Just knowing that, Alex Cora is coming in and working with kind of a completely different team than he had back in 2018. And a lot of those players are still there, but overall, it's when you look at the whole roster, there's only 9 players right now that were on the 2018 World Series team.
It's crazy, and it really is insane to think about. You're talking about the Killer Bees, Benintendi, Betts, and Bogarts, and Bradley even, or Bradley, Bogarts, Benintendi.
Yeah.
Or I got it all confused now. Benintendi, Bradley, Betts. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, in that outfield. And now that's been dismantled. Essentially, I mean, there's talks, there's some chirping going around the league, some reporting that's been that Jackie Bradley will indeed probably make it back to the Red Sox because it now makes sense with Andrew Benintendi being gone. They can do it financially, but that remains to be seen. Right now, this team is without a lot of those stars that you mentioned, and it just goes to show how professional sports and now baseball even has become this cyclical thing, and it goes in cycles, and players come and players go. The teams that succeed and the teams that have had success, like you think about the Dodgers, what they were able to do.
Yeah.
I think it was 9 years running. They were the division champions, right? That's because they maintained their core group of players. They had the stars, and they were able to finally reach the pinnacle last season and win in the World Series, adding a Mookie Betts. But teams that have this constant roster shuffling and no continuity, no players, are going to struggle. And I mentioned that on the Nesson After Hours podcast, actually, with Seeley and Emerson, about since I arrived in Boston in 2016, that 17 season and 18 season where they were world champs. That was probably the most consistency and continuity that I've seen between two teams, with the exception of losing John Farrell after the 17th season, but bringing in Alex Cora. You look at the pieces that were there; those are the same guys that they lost that divisional round against Cleveland when it was Big Papi's last year. 17, they lost to the Astros, who went on to win the World Series. Whether they cheated or not, that's still up for debate, depending on who you ask. And then 18, finally winning it all in LA. Those 3 years, they kept very few roster changes as far as their major league roster and guys who are contributing. After that, you can say this team has been blown up in several different variations, and then they lose Alex after 19. They also lose several players, the Joe Kellys of the world, the Craig Kimbrells of the world, guys like this who have gone on in free agency who are no longer part of it. So a lot of that lack of continuity and the lack of keeping these guys together, it probably contributed to some of the learning curve that they needed. And then you lessen that to not 162 games, but now figure it out in 60 games. It's just tough. So it's been an uphill climb, which is why I feel optimistic about this team and what they can do this season. They get Chris Sale back healthy, hopefully sometime in the summer. And some of the pieces that they have rotationally, I think they'll be okay. They're going to surprise a lot of people. Are they going to contend with the Yankees, who are arguably at the top? Are they going to contend with the Toronto Blue Jays, who are stacked now? That remains to be seen. But I feel like this team is going to be night and day from what they were last season.
I agree with you. And I've had this conversation with people before too. And the thing is, people kind of forget how good the offense was last year just because the pitching was not good. So offensively, they put up some good numbers and they led the league in hits and everything. So the offense, I mean, for the most part, is still relatively the same. And with the pitching, obviously missing Erod and Chris Sale wasn't helping them either. So obviously the pitching needed a lot of work, but they've done some things to kind of improve the pitching that hopefully the Garrett Richards ends up panning out, because that could be a decent signing for them too if he pans out and actually stays healthy, because when he stays healthy, he's pretty good. So the key for him is going to be healthy, and I like the Martin Perez signing too. Tanner Houck was good last year, but
the incredible Houck.
Yeah, it's a small sample size compared in the grand scheme of things how much he pitched. But if he pitches like he did last season, then that's a great guy to have too. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Nathan Eovaldi. I think he's a good pitcher. I think he can be inconsistent, but overall, I think he's good. And yeah, it'll be nice to have Chris Sale back healthy. And I think that the pitching staff is going to be better than they were last year. And with the bullpen, that Ottavino signing, what did
Oh
you
yeah.
think of that?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because the Red Sox and Yankees over the last 25 years, maybe even more, they made two trades. Two trades. Like these two people don't do business together because they're in the same division. They're competing for the same things year in and year out. So this is also a part of the new, I guess, mindset of a guy like Chaim Bloom, was a chief baseball officer for the Red Sox, coming in here, being his own man. A lot of fans hate it. They don't understand it, but they got to also realize that, you know, Rome wasn't built over in one day. It's a process to getting there. This guy has a plan. At least give him the latitude to try and work that out. Of course, it's going to be painful, as you mentioned, when Andrew Benintendi was traded away.
Yeah.
A lot of it's going to be painstaking. You're going to question it. You're going to wonder. But the pieces that they got back in place, they feel like they work together collectively rather than just being one single star. And they save a little bit of money in the process. But the Ottavino signing, if he can be who he was a couple seasons ago, it's going to turn this bullpen upside down. Yeah. And I think it's going to really be a great piece for this Red Sox team. I like the dude. I like him. Plus, he went to Northeastern. Like he's a Boston local guy anyways. Yeah. And I think he fit right in.
Yeah, for sure. I was shocked that they did an interdivisional trade like that, because we never really see that happen, especially between the Red Sox and Yankees. Everybody was like, wow, that's of all teams for Ottavino to get traded to, I did not expect it to be the Red Sox, because I knew that the Yankees were trying to trade him somewhere, and there were all these reports coming out about it, because I think it was a salary dump more than anything, and I think that they were trying to trade him for a while, but the Red Sox were kind of the last team I expected him to go to. But then when I thought about him on this roster and where the bullpen was at before they signed him, which was very not a good place, he could contribute a lot to this bullpen, but that's if he brings what he brought a couple seasons ago, because he struggled last year. But I don't really like judging players based off of last year, because it was a shortened season and there was just it was such an unprecedented time with COVID and everything that I try to look more at seasons prior to that, and if he can pitch that way that we've seen him in the past, that's a great addition to this bullpen. And some people were also saying that maybe by the trade deadline, if they're not in contention, they consider trading him again for some prospects or something. And I wonder if that's something that Bloom had in mind when he did sign him, is that maybe they could flip him at the deadline for prospects if they're not in contention, and they wouldn't want to keep spending the money on him for the rest of this season and just going forward if they're not in contention this year.
I think it's all in play. I think Chaim is super smart. He's intelligent. It's why he was on the radar for several different organizations, not just the Red Sox. I think he probably would not, shy away from that. I don't want to speak for him, but I think it's all possible in professional sports. Anything can happen, really. Nobody's expendable or inexpendable, if that's even a word. I'm not sure if I used that correctly, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
Anybody can be traded. Anybody can be shipped off. And we saw that, especially over the last couple seasons when it comes to this Boston Red Sox team. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
Well, yeah, because it all started with the Mookie trade, and then we've seen everything that happened from there. But a lot of people were really upset when the news broke about Benintendi being traded, and we knew for kind of a while that that was a possibility, that they were looking into trade options for him. And with what they got in return, I guess we'll see how that pans out too, and then they're still getting 3 players to be named later. I guess they're going to go and basically pick out prospects that they like from those 2 teams, from the Royals and Mets, and pick 1 from the Mets and 2 from the Royals. And hopefully it ends up being worth it, that whole trade. And then because Andrew Benintendi was gone, people were like, oh, I wonder if this means that Jackie is coming back. And then he signed Marwin Gonzalez. So the outfield right now, to me, is still kind of a question mark, just in terms of who's going to play where.
Yeah, it is. That Marwin Gonzalez signing certainly felt like it filled the need for them, but there's so many games in baseball. You got to account for potential injuries too. And if Jackie comes back, he's going to be the everyday guy. I think that that would be his place, his rightful place in center field. I mean, he's a 2-time Gold Glove winning center fielder. He's done it all here at the Red Sox. They know what they have in him. I think the right fielder, the guy who would be on his left, would be Alex Verdugo. And then in left field, you got to probably think that Gonzalez is out there, because I don't think that Kike Hernandez would be playing there every day if they decided to move him, because he has that ability to go from the outfield or play in the infield. Or Hunter Renfroe. I don't think he'd be looked at as like an everyday guy to be out there as well. So I think they're in good shape. But there's a lot of questions, certainly, as it relates to how this roster is going to be constructed, though.
Yeah, that's why when they signed Renfroe, I kind of wondered. That seemed like a random signing to me, because I was like, he doesn't really seem like the type of guy that they would have out in the outfield every day. So I guess he probably would just be kind of that secondary guy that comes in. But again, this all depends on JBJ's situation too, because if they don't bring back JBJ, then I guess that third position, it would be a question who they would have be kind of the number one main guy out there, because Verdugo is going to be out there probably every day, pretty much.
Exactly, and kind of like the 1A piece to right field or even left field for the Red Sox is JD Martinez. You can't forget that he also can play outfield, but he's primarily going to be the designated hitter. Yeah. So he's a person with the ability to play the position. You're not going to have him out there every single day. And then who they just acquired from the Royals, Franchi Cordero. The guy has speed. The guy can hit. He strikes out a lot. There's no question. But he is a guy who can play the position too and play it at a high level. So I think that they'll be, if they need to play with the pieces that they have, I think they'll be fine. They'll be able to figure it out. But adding JBJ will certainly solidify it out there.
Yeah, definitely. And I like Kike Hernandez too. I think that, especially as a locker room guy, that's somebody that Dodgers fans were always talking about how good of a locker room guy he is to have around, and just somebody that can be there to help with some of the young players on the team and just be that experienced guy that is out there and has, the playoff and now World Series experience too. So I'm happy that they signed him, because he's really versatile and he can play a lot of positions. So he's kind of the new version of Brock Holt, but just a younger kind of more talented now version of Brock Holt that can kind of fill that role, I feel like.
100%. I agree with you there. And you think about the years that he spent in LA, right? He's playing with guys who are proven major leaguers, guys he's not necessarily going to get in front of in the infield or even in the outfield. So he's been a platoon guy, a utility guy used for a Red Sox, a Dodgers team that had plans, and they made it to the World Series. They sold out. They got what they wanted. Now, and he said it in his introductory press conference, Kike, when he met with the Boston baseball press, that having the ability to play every day was attractive to him, and thinking about where he wanted to spend the next few years with Boston. So 2 years here makes sense. The fact that he's Puerto Rican, he's got those heritage. He connects with Alex Cora in that regard. Again, great locker room guy. Like, I love Kike Hernandez, fantastic baseball player, guy who does it right, plus who is super talented. So he felt like he can reach another level if given the opportunity to play every day. He didn't want to put the expectations on himself, but I have to be prone to believe that, considering what he's proven for a guy who's been used in a utility role, what he did for the Dodgers in the World Series, phenomenal. The guy can play. He's got real talent. I'm interested and excited to be seeing him out there every day.
Me too. I am excited about that also. And I think that a lot of the moves that we've seen in this offseason initially get questioned, and people are like, oh, what is Bloom doing? And everything else. But then he'll go and he'll sign somebody that ultimately ends up making sense when you look back at kind of how their roster looks right now. He'll go and he'll sign somebody that makes sense to fill certain roles that we weren't sure how those roles were going to pan out. And even after he signed Kike, I was like, I don't think that they're done. There's going to be more moves made before spring training starts. And I think that when Benintendi was traded, I was like, yeah, I don't know. The moves that he's now made and signing Gonzalez, maybe he's done now. But it's however this team looks right now and what they have on that roster right now, between the lineup and between even the rotation, they're not going to be a sleeper team like people think that they're going to be because of how they were last season. This is a much better, improved Red Sox team that was missing some key key parts last year. And I think whether they bring back Jackie or not, I still think that they're going to be a team that, I mean, maybe can be maybe a wild card spot, but that'd be if everything kind of comes together and the question marks surrounding the rotation, everybody that's a question mark in the rotation would have to perform at a high level in order for that to work. But I do feel like they have a chance. And then the other good thing about them right now is that even if they don't contend in 2021, they are pretty set up for their future the next couple of years, especially because they have some prospects now that they can, utilize. And just with just some of the changes that they've made, they're definitely well on their way to be contenders in the next couple of years, even if it's not 2021.
Definitely. And a lot of people are more short-sighted. It's always interesting to see the reactions for people who have these visceral reactions to a trade that they just found out about, right?
Yeah.
Like they had any idea that it was going on. They found out about it just like the rest of us. So that's always interesting. But yeah, Heim's thinking about the long game here. Obviously, with the moves that he's made, he's trying to build a championship contender for years to come. Not necessarily somebody who's going to win right now per se, but have competition to compete, to have an opportunity to do that. Yes, this team is going to compete. This team is going to be a tough team to play against. People aren't going to like coming into Boston or facing them on the road, whatever. Because if these, as you mentioned, these rotational pieces come together, who knows what Eduardo Rodriguez is going to be coming off of COVID complications with the myocarditis, but he missed all of last season. Yeah. He looked primed and ready to go this year. You said Martin Perez, he's coming back on a 1-year deal. He was the ace of the staff in 2020, although they underperformed. But if he can not be looked at as like a guy who needs to be the ace and fall back in the bottom half of the rotation, he can be more a better addition and more in line with his skill set. So you don't know what Chris Sale is going to be. He'll be back sometime in the summer, but you know what Nathan Eovaldi gives you. You know what he's going to give to you. And you think about Tanner Houck, Nick Pivetta is also out there, and some of these guys in the rotation. I think this team is going to be okay. And they like the fact that they're being discounted right now. They like the fact that nobody's talking about them, because that's how you come up and surprise team. I feel in line with what you're saying, Gabby. A wild card is not out of the question, depending on how things come together with the pitching, of course. I think this could be a wild card team.
Yeah, I think it could be too. And I think a lot of people, as you said, are counting them out already, and they're fine with that. And I know Heim made a statement the other day. He was asked, do you think that this team can contend in 2021? And he said, I think that they could, because I think he's building the team to be good enough where they really can contend for a wild card spot right now. And if they don't, they have a lot of the pieces to be well on their way. So I'm looking at longer term, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, this is going to be a really, really good Red Sox team. And I think he knows that, and he's planning for that right now. But at the same time, he knows that based on some of the moves that he's made, this team could be good enough to get into the playoffs. I mean, they decided they're not doing the expanded playoffs this year, which I actually like. I wanted the regular format back anyway, and I understand obviously why they had to do it for 2020 because of the season they had and everything. But I just felt like the expanded playoffs just takes away from a lot of the competitive aspect of it, and teams that wouldn't normally be in the postseason were getting in. So I like the regular playoff format because I think it just makes everything more intense. But I think even without, I don't think they would need the expanded playoffs to be a wild card team this year. I think they have the talent, as long as everything comes together with that pitching staff, that they have the talent to make a wild card without even though they're not doing the expanded playoffs this year and they're going back to the regular format.
Yeah, definitely. For this Red Sox team, really for any team in the majors, it all starts on what happens on the hill. So the pitching comes together. I feel the same way. This team can put it together and be contending for a wild card because, I mean, they could arguably be in one of the toughest divisions in baseball. So they got to just fight within their own division. But if they can make it out of there and have an opportunity, they'll be okay.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto's made a ton of moves this offseason.
Oh my God.
They're going to be really good. I mean, the Yankees, basically, I think a lot of people think that the Yankees are a shoo-in to win the division.
Right. But they did nothing, basically.
Yeah, they haven't done really
anything.
Exactly. And it's like, if you can't make changes, and their pitching still, to me right now, I don't think is good enough to go all the way and win a World Series right now. Because their pitching has always been the issue for them that we've seen, at least the past few years. It's been a pitching issue, and I don't think they have enough pieces right now on their pitching side to go all the way. But the moves Toronto's made, they're really going to be up there too. And I don't think that it's going to be just a cakewalk division for the Yankees to win.
No question about that. I mean, honestly, on paper, it's like, Toronto's building a contender right now.
Yeah.
They have all those young pieces that they've had as well. And adding a guy like George Springer, some of these other arms on the hill, it's ridiculous. Like, they are going to be a good team if they can stay healthy. Again, health is wealth and availability is your best ability. So we'll see what happens with this club, with the Blue Jays and the rest of these teams within the AL East.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a fun season to watch. I did want to ask you, because they did decide that they're going to do this, which is that whole rule with starting people on second base in extra innings, because there's a lot of mixed opinions going on that, and they decided that they're going to instill that rule for this season.
Yeah, and a lot of people might not like with my opinion, but I absolutely love it because I'm a baseball fan. I'm not a baseball purist. I'm not one of those guys who like, 3-4 hour games. Who cares if you don't like it? Get out of here. No, I think this is why Theo Epstein is now taking a position in Major League Baseball's front office, because they got a real issue when it comes to pace of play, the time of games, the type of people who are watching their product. They want to get younger. They want to do all this and compete with the NBAs of the world, the National Football Leagues. And this is the way to do it. I think this makes it exciting. Starting 10th inning with the runner on second, it's going to be a faster game. And I think with this new rule last year, a game didn't go past the 13th inning. So they're ending faster. And as somebody who sat through 19, 20 inning games, I'm all for it because it's just miserable. Nobody should have to watch that.
I'll never forget that 18-inning World Series game in 2018 against the Dodgers, and how that game just felt never-ending because it was just going on for hours.
But at that level, I can get with it. But I'm talking about game 53 when you got 162. Come on, let's get out of here, people. At the postseason, let's do it.
Why play a 6-hour game now when you're not even halfway through the season yet, and this game is not going to matter down the line?
Exactly. My point exactly. And you already know Red Sox and Yankees already play 4-hour games as it is. So you got so much time that you're devoting to this. Like, come on, let's get out of here. That's why I love the time sports. Hockey, you'd be like, all right, 2.5 hours, basketball, 2.5 hours, baseball, NFL football, 3 hours. We're out of here. Baseball needs to do a better job. And, I like what they're doing so far.
Yeah, because even with those sports, if they go into overtime, there's still a specific ending.
Yes, there's an end point inside.
Eventually, the game's going to end, especially, with basketball. It's like, even if basketball goes to overtime, it's 5 minutes. So it's like, it's not going to be that much longer past the regulation if it goes one overtime. So at least with other sports, that it's a definite ending. But baseball games, I would, especially the games where they travel to the West Coast, and they're taking those West Coast trips, and they're starting
starts like, come on,
10 p.m. and then they're going like 13, 14 innings.
It's absolute nightmare. And come on. It's like, what are we doing here? You really question your fandom at that point when you're sitting up, especially at me. And I'm sitting out working. Like, I got to host a show. I'm waiting for the Red Sox to get off the air at 1:30 in the morning. You know what I mean? It's just like, what are we doing here? You start questioning your life choices at that point. But yeah, I'm all for it. Right. Exactly. I'm all for it.
For it to cover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's get us out of here.
It puts a lot of pressure on the pitchers too, which I feel like is actually kind of fun, because if you give up a single, the game essentially is over. Unless it's the top of the inning, because then the bottom of the inning they could do the same thing, But it puts a lot more pressures on pitchers coming in those innings.
Absolutely, and that makes it more exciting. It ups the level of anxiety for everybody on the field, because, like you said, one single, you already got a running and scoring position. There's potential they might score. So it speeds up the game. It makes it feel that much more faster, and actually, it makes you feel more attentive because you don't want to miss something. So I feel like it accomplishes every goal that Major League Baseball is trying to do. I hope it stays. I hope it's not just a one and done after this season, or two and done, I guess. Because next year, following the end of this season, they got a collective bargaining agreement. You got to believe this is going to be on the table.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's something that we really could see permanently, just as a, because they only said that it's a rule for this year right now. They haven't even gone past 2021, but I agree with you. I think it's something that we really possibly could see as just a permanent change. And I mean, they don't want to do the universal DH either. And I kind of liked that. I kind of liked the universal DH rule from last year, to be honest.
I didn't be, and I think it's because I'm an NL guy. Like I grew up with National League teams. I grew up with pitchers having to hit. I'm like, hey, don't suck. If you don't want to do it, don't suck. Like take some time and focus on that. I think it's great to have everybody hit. It takes you back to Little League, but I understand the argument where you want your best hitters and you want to create offense. But yeah, I didn't really like the universal DH. I hope it stays how it is, with the two leagues.
It's just weird to go and see people like Nathan Eovaldi have to go and hit.
It's funny. That's like entertainment value.
Yeah. Playing like the Phillies or something, and it's like next up to bat is Nathan Eovaldi. It's just so weird. It's weird to me, but that's just something that I guess I can't really see the NL ever instilling the DH rule permanently.
Yeah. And I hope they don't. But, I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, but I'm in the minority possibly. But I like the pitchers hitting because when you got guys like, what's my guy's name who was with the Giants for all those years? He was hitting ropes, home runs, the ace, Madison Bumgarner.
Oh, yeah, Madison Bumgarner.
Like when he's roping home runs out of here, Yeah, he guy's good at hitting. Clayton Kershaw can hit. So, I mean, David Price will tell you he can hit.
Yes.
He was always saying he used to hit bombs or whatever. But I like the pitchers hitting. I like them giving an opportunity. It's fun, and when they do well, it's a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. I'll never forget one game a few years ago. I think it actually was 2018 when they were playing the Nationals and Scherzer was pitching. And I'll never forget, Porcello comes up to bat and he just rips like a bases clearing double and put the Red Sox in the lead, and that's how they ended up winning that game because not much action happened in that game besides that. And it's you see him go up to bat and it's like, oh great, he's hitting against their ace with the bases loaded and we have a pitcher coming up to hit and he just crushes the ball like off the wall like a bases clearing double. And I was like, I'm never going to forget that situation because that was one of my proudest Red Sox pitchers hitting moments.
Yeah, and he delivered, right? So, there's also even though it might be slim, there's potential that it happens when these guys get up to bat. So you want to not take that opportunity out of their hands. And to me, it creates more strategy. When you have to deal with your substitutions, you have to think about these things when you're playing National League teams. It adds an element to the game too, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah, but this year is going to be interesting, and especially now with Dustin Pedroia officially retired, that hits home for me, because I grew up watching him with this team. I mean, he was part of that 2004 Red Sox World Series team. So for me, growing up a Red Sox fan, he's somebody that's just going to be a forever Red Sox legend, I think, especially because he spent his whole career with the Red Sox. And nowadays, it's rare, I feel like, that you find players that spend their entire career with one team. So that's really special to me. And with you being around the Red Sox for the last few years and everything, what kind of impact do you feel like he had on the team and just the way that he was just around everybody and the locker room and everything else?
Oh man, major impact. And although he's not playing anymore, I don't think it'll be felt that much because he did stay involved quite a bit. He was always watching the games. He was always texting guys when he did come around during his injury, during his recovery. He'd be sitting in the dugout having conversations with Rafael Devers, having conversations with him on the infield. I mean, Petey's going to be missed, certainly. And he loved this game and he played in a way that made you want to watch him, So we talked about continuity earlier in the show, and he was one of the pieces that you can always expect to be with the Red Sox. It was part of that glue, part of that fabric of the organization who had past and old connections, who basically carried the torch for all those years. So for him not to be there in official capacity now, like it was one thing when he was injured, but now we know that he's retired. It's going to be a little bit different. I think Xander Bogaerts is probably the most tenured Red Sox now at this point.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a little bit crazy. And I think Christian Vasquez is probably number 2 on that list. And it's like, okay, well, this is what it's like. This is what it's like when your stars and legends of the game kind of move on and are at the back end of their career. I think when David left, this was kind of, you looked at Petey. Now that Petey's gone, it's like, all right, well, who are we looking at now? You
It
know,
probably Xander Bogaerts, I would think. Yeah.
right. But it's a little bit of a transitional period, and it's tough to accept. But I think they'll be just fine, and they'll have their staple in the organization. Hopefully, it's Bogey. Hopefully, it's Devers, who plays out their career here. But having him go in the way he did, especially only playing in 9 games, the last season he played in, it was tough to watch. But right now for him, it's about quality of life, and he'll be missed. And I mean, the man was on pace for a Hall of Fame career. There would have been no question he would have been a baseball Hall of Famer had he stayed healthy.
Injured, I know. It's
right. I mean, batted a career 299. He almost eclipsed 300. Like, to me, he was one of the most clutch hitters in points where you needed big hits. And he was also the most dominant. Like, he wouldn't consistently be bad. Like, he'd miss one game or he'd maybe go 0 for 4, but he'd come back the next and be 3 out of 4. He'd always have a hit. Like, the way he approached the game from the batter's box, I feel like I've never really watched anybody do it like that. He would always get hits. It was hard to pitch around Pedroia.
It was, yeah, and it's really sad because he truly was on pace to have a Hall of Fame career, and if he had still played and not been injured the last few years, I think he definitely would be for sure. And
absolutely,
it's really sad that this is the way that he had to go because he never fully recovered from that injury. And for me, even though he was injured and wasn't really playing, he was still present and he was still on the team. So it's just a different feeling now because you're not going to be able to see him, out there sitting in the dugout talking to other players and everything like that, and just really being there and being a part of the team. But we know that he'll still watch the games and he'll still always be part of the Red Sox. But it's just sad to look at somebody like that and look at the career he was having and just how quickly things changed because of his injury and how he just never could get back to full form. And he won't, unfortunately, be in the Hall of Fame now because of that. But he definitely was on pace to do that. And he's going to be one of those players, like, when I look back on even 20 years from now, as just one of those Red Sox legends that I'm never going to forget.
Yeah, and he'll be a Red Sox Hall of Famer for sure. At some point, I think they're going to honor him and do it right. So his number 15 may go up there next to Poppy's eventually, but I think the Red Sox fans know what he meant to the game, know what he means to the organization, and he'll be appreciated properly when the time comes for people to be back in the seats. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that too, and I love the Red Sox and I always will, and he'll always be somebody that holds a special place in my heart and Red Sox fans' hearts. So I'm excited to see what happens this season, though. Hopefully they can get a full season in and COVID doesn't become as serious of an issue, and with the vaccine and everything, that's giving me hope. So I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm ready for opening day already. So we'll see what happens, but definitely appreciated you joining me for this episode of Boston Balling. It was a great conversation, and I hope everybody continues to stay healthy and safe. Be sure to follow Boston Balling on all social media platforms and subscribe to the show on any podcast streaming platform. And I always appreciate everybody's constant support of the show. So I'll talk to you all next time. Have a good rest of your day.
See you later.